Well, there's many things I'm grateful for. My grandchildren, they're the ones who keep me happy and going.
My family, my classmates in my school.
Good food, good steak.
Definitely God and my family.
I'm grateful for my family and my church.
Just having dinner with my wife. When you look back in your life, the conversations you have at the dinner table are something that are really gonna mean a lot to you.
I definitely haven't told my brother that I'm grateful for him because sometimes he can be a real big pain, but I do love him so much. He's always there, and I really appreciate that.
Waking up next to my beautiful bride.
Finding a church community that I can really connect with.
My children.
My family always has my back no matter what.
I'm grateful that God forgives us for all the things that we've done wrong, and He takes our messes and He's able to make it better than it was before. I'm grateful the way He brought my family together. And I'm gonna get emotional so I can.
I'm even happy to be alive since I just came out of the hospital with a blood clot in my lung, and here I am.
I get to go outside every day and breathe this fresh air that calms me and gives me peace when I'm feeling anxious.
I am grateful for everything I have, and I will always be grateful.
Gratitude changes everything.
You know what I love about that video? The genuine smiles that you see on the faces of the people sitting in that chair. Like there are these deep, heartfelt, like soul-level smiles, genuine joy. And what's amazing is that I've watched that probably now like 100 times because it's phenomenal. But what's amazing is like I feel how contagious it is when I'm watching. And no one's talking about my life or the things I need to be grateful for, but I actually start to smile myself. And even just watching between this service and the last service, like watching what it looks like when other people watch that video, you see the same thing. There's this element of like, it just spreads. It spreads. The joy is so real and it's contagious. There's something contagious about gratitude, about being grateful. And so I like watch that video, and the thing that I think about is really like what it would look like to live there just a little more, right? Like to just be in that state of mind a little more often. Like nothing about anyone in that video, like no circumstances changed in their lives. There was nothing, nobody was given anything and then they were happy. It was simply looking, or we can say like simply seeing the good in their lives that brought that joy and spread that joy to so many others. So like what would it look like to live just a little bit more in that direction, you know? With that really nice, gentle music playing in the background, and the reeds blowing and all the neutral browns that everyone there was wearing. What would it look like to live there? I got a phone call. Actually, I made a phone call about a month and a half ago, maybe. I was talking to somebody, a real grateful guy. His name's David Meyer. He's actually a pastor at one of our partner churches in Texas. And I get on the phone with him, and right away, he's been doing this way longer than I have, so I was calling him for some advice, talk about some stuff, and right away, like the first thing he says, he picks up the phone, he's like, Lou, man, tell me, what is going well in your life right now? And I was like, whoa. Like, I like was in a different state of mind. Like there was so much going well, but I realized in the moment just how far I was emotionally functioning from all the good in my life. Like had he asked, what's going wrong? Like what stinks about life? I'd be able to rattle a million things off. Like, you know, like, oh, my knee hurts for some reason when it rains now. I got a weird pain in my back. My bedroom is hot. I sweat at night. Like there's all these weird, awkward challenges in my life. And it's so easy to just live there, But what if we like took steps in the direction of gratitude? What would that look like? You know, there's this one verse in the Bible is actually written by a guy named Paul. He's writing to followers of Jesus. And I would read this. This is one of those verses I'd be like, oh yeah. You know, he says, give thanks, be grateful in all circumstances, all of them. For this is God's will for you in Christ Jesus. Now, this is one of those statements that's just like a religious thing, and we're kind of like, okay, we just like dismiss it. But really, the idea here is this is what God wants for you. And I'd read that and be like, oh, that's right. God wants me to always be grateful, right? And I do it because I'm supposed to, or try to do it, or say I do it because I'm supposed to. But what if gratitude really does change everything? Like Amanda said in the video. If you look up right now on Google or some other treasury of knowledge, the benefits of gratitude, you'll see things that are all across the board, right? Like gratitude has a positive effect on your physical health, your mental health, helps you to get better sleep, be more resilient, have stronger relationships, enhanced self-esteem, boosted optimism, increased productivity, better decision making, and in general, overall, like a better sense of well-being and happiness. Gratitude. That's what God wants for you. All those things. You know, it kind of like helps you see it in a different light. And so, that's it then, right? Why are we wasting our time here? Go. Be grateful. Why don't we do it? If there's something you can eat, like some pill you can take, or something you could drink or watch or whatever, that would give you all of those benefits, we all be online for it. And so why? Why are we not more grateful? Here's what I would suggest. I think, or at least if your story's like mine, maybe you've been told to be grateful, but not nearly as often have you been shown how to be grateful. What if being grateful or practicing gratitude isn't just simply saying thanks? You know, what if there's actually a form almost of shadow gratitude, this counterfeit gratitude? Or what if we have been told to be grateful for certain things and have learned to say that we are without ever feeling feelings of gratitude toward those things? And so we're like, oh, we tried it. Gratitude, I guess I know it's supposed to work, but really it just doesn't do anything for me. Think about this, and you know this to be true, right? Imagine you give a kid a plate of broccoli, and you're like, here, eat this. And he doesn't want to. So you say, you should be grateful for that. And so now he knows to be grateful for that. And he might even learn to say he's grateful for it without ever experiencing real feelings of gratitude towards that broccoli. And so over the next couple weeks, 3 weeks, we're gonna look at 3 ways or 3 tools, 3 not quick fixes, but quality steps in the direction of gratitude. How we can be a little bit more grateful, or how to be a little bit more grateful. And the place we need to start might seem kind of unrelated, but it's so important that we start from this point with the first thing. So, Tom, can I have my tree, please? Thank you very much. I stole this from my living room this morning. You know what kind of tree this is? It's a fake one. So recently I've been listening to this woman. Her name's Caroline Leaf. She's a doctor, Dr. Caroline Leaf. She's a scientist. She studies the brain. She's a follower of Jesus, and she loves to connect the things that Jesus said and followers of Jesus taught with what's going on in the brain. She says some really great things, right? If you're interested in that, you should check her out. Her name's Dr. Caroline Leaf, and she talks a lot about trees in the brain, which I think is so perfect because her name's Dr. Leaf, right? She's like, okay, so in your mind, again, this might seem unrelated, but hopefully it'll make sense eventually, right? In your mind, it's like your brain is filled with these trees, right? In fact, if you look at it under a microscope, there are actually things in your brain that look like this. And with the trees, there are different like parts and levels of the trees. The outermost layer are the leaves, right? Caroline leaf. And those are the things that we see. Those are the things that we feel. Those are the things that we're conscious of. She would say the leaves, the outermost layer, those are the things that are in your conscious mind. And all of them are connected to other parts of this tree, eventually going down to the roots, and those are part of the subconscious mind, meaning they're memories or facts or stories or beliefs that ultimately determine the leaves out here, like what's actually coming out. She's like, this is how the mind works. So what's interesting, Jesus actually taught the same thing, and he used an example of trees, right? He talks about how we just produce fruit, and it's more scientific than we realize, right? But the idea is like, think about it like this, okay? And this has nothing to do with gratitude. But imagine you're driving in a car, or you're in the back seat of a car, and there's a driver, and you notice the driver's like driving really, really fast, and you're passing by all these cars, just going faster and faster and faster, and he's being totally irresponsible. And he pulls out his phone, he starts like texting, and then he starts watching YouTube videos on his phone, and he's just flying down the road. You're gonna be in the back, and you know what you're gonna feel like out on these leaves? Something, right? You're gonna start to feel uncomfortable. You might start to feel anxious, worried, maybe even angry. Be angry, like at how inconsiderate this person's being. Right? And those are the things that you're conscious of, that you're feeling, but whether you know it or not, there's a belief beneath the surface that's actually informing those feelings. And the belief is some form of the idea that people die in car accidents. Like, you may not be consciously aware, like that may not be the thought on your mind in that moment, but if you didn't believe that, you wouldn't be feeling anxious and worried and angry and all of those things. And what Dr. Leaf would explain is that if you want to change what's happening at the level of the leaves, you have to get to what's happening beneath the surface. And once you can put a name to the belief that's beneath the surface, it then becomes changeable. And then you can change what you see on the leaves. In other words, like, what we need is to be aware. The first step in the direction of gratitude, you'll see how this connects to gratitude in just a minute. The first thing we need to be aware of is the beliefs beneath the surface. Right? So if you're in a car and the guy's speeding and I'm in the back seat with you, you know what I can't say? I can't say like, hey, don't worry. That's not gonna work. You can't just like try and do something to the leaves. You have to somehow speak to the belief. Now, if that's actually happening to you in a car, you should be worried. You should tell the guy to slow down, okay? Like, just to get that out there. But if you can somehow change the belief beneath the surface, the feelings will change. When it comes to gratitude, gratitude lives in the leaves. Those feelings of being grateful live in the leaves, and they're connected to beliefs beneath the surface. Or we can say your beliefs beneath the surface will amplify or undermine your ability to feel grateful. Right? So let's take that little boy, for example, with the broccoli. Remember him in the beginning? Okay. Let's say that little boy has got dreams of playing in the NBA one day. And you take that broccoli and you can say to him, be grateful. But really what you're doing is addressing the leaves. And he might learn to say, I'm grateful. But if you somehow explain to him that if he eats that broccoli, he's gonna be 6'10", you can bet that when you go into Stop and Shop, he's gonna be running to the vegetable aisle. And he's gonna feel feelings of gratitude because you've become aware of the belief beneath the surface, have spoken to it, and now it's changeable. And so there's feelings of gratitude. But we need to be aware of these beliefs beneath the surface. So what I'm trying to say here is that there are some things in your life, I'm willing to bet, that you believe you should be grateful for. And maybe, if you're honest, you've learned to say you're grateful for them. But there aren't real feelings of gratitude toward that thing. And maybe there's a belief beneath the surface that's undermining your gratitude. So some of you might remember this. We talked about this a few times in the past several years. When we're talking about relationships, I heard this pastor one time say, like, basically, and I'm oversimplifying here, but basically he's like, if you struggle to feel like grateful toward your spouse for the things that they're doing, whether it's like working for the family or doing things around the house, if you struggle to feel that way, probably what's happened is that the things that they're doing have become expectations. You just expect them to do that. And when something becomes an expectation and someone doesn't follow through with that expectation, the feeling that like arises within you or the idea is that you are owed something. Like really, there's a belief within you that she's supposed to do that for me, that he's supposed to do that. And if you don't, then you owe me. And I remember the first time I heard that, we've talked about that here a little bit if you've been with us. The first time I heard that, that rocked my world. You know why? Because I would admit to saying like, oh yeah, like I want to be more grateful as a husband, I really should be, and so maybe I should try a little bit harder. But once he gave words to the belief beneath the surface, once he named that entitlement that was living within me, it now, like I became aware of it, and it now became something I could address, right? Because I'm fine with saying, I probably should be a little bit more grateful, but I'm not fine with saying, you're supposed to do that, and if you don't, you owe me. And so now it was something I could actually work on. And so now, like, I'm in my marriage, I'm grateful for everything, and we're just perfect all the time, and we're always smiling. No, I'm just kidding. I still have problems, but now I know why. You need to address the belief beneath the surface. We've talked about this in a number of different ways. Jesus has talked about this in a number of different ways, whether it's this idea of trees or the heart, but things start from within before they come out, right? So here's like, I think, like something that we need to wrestle with, all right? One of the largest and most influential trees, so to speak, within your mind is the idea of God. Who God is, if he is, what he's like. Because it's one of those things that has like implication for the leaves in so many other areas of life. And if your story's anything like mine, maybe you've been taught that you should be grateful to God, and you've learned to say you are, and maybe you haven't actually had those feelings of gratitude toward him. But because it's God and because it's church and because there's guilt and shame and all those complex emotions, sometimes we're hesitant to look within and say like, well, maybe I'm not grateful because there's a belief there that I don't want to address. Let me put it this way, right? Your beliefs about God, I think, will amplify or undermine your ability to feel grateful. Or you can even say, because this is such a broad thing, you can say your worldview and where God fits into that. The way you view the world in general and God's role in that will amplify or undermine your ability to actually feel grateful. And that's a belief beneath the surface. There was this one time where Jesus was speaking to a large crowd. He had some religious people, he had some non-religious people there, and he was constantly trying to help people see who he was and what God is like. That was like back and forth. He was constantly going back and forth. I'm like this, God's like this, right? And it's like this is at the heart of his message. And he used all these metaphors to try and get people to feel what he wants them to feel toward God. And so he's speaking to a group of people who either were shepherds, like people who watch sheep, or knew shepherds, or saw shepherds, right? It was like a regular part of their society. And so he goes into like that metaphor as he's trying to describe God, and he says, okay, so let's think about it like this. Like, let's say there's a thief. There's a thief. You know the thief. If you're a shepherd, you know the thief. If you know a shepherd, you know how the shepherd feels about the thief. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. The thief comes to take, to limit, to ruin, to sabotage. The thief can't be trusted. The thief is a threat to your well-being because the thief will come and take the sheep. It's like, so picture that, you know that feeling, and everyone there is like, yeah, oh yeah, we watch out for the thief. You know, we're always on the lookout. We tell each other about the thieves because the thieves are a threat to our well-being. It's like, okay, we'll take those feelings, right? Now, like, let's go the opposite direction. And he says, but I have come that they, talking about these sheep, talking about people, talking about you and I, may have life. And not just life like alive, but he says life to the full. Other translations say life more abundantly. That I've come so that they may experience the richness of life. And he goes on and says, so if we're talking about shepherds, well, I am the good shepherd, which is actually a reference to the book of Jeremiah, which the people in that audience would have known. And he's saying, I am this good shepherd. And you know what? This good shepherd, he lays down his life for the sheep. Like, that's next level. He's like, I've come to give life to the full. So much, I want this so much so that I'm willing to lay down my life for you. If you were here last week, that was what the whole message was about. When we talked about the Last Supper and Jesus saying, this is how far I'll go for you, this is how much I'll give for you. For you. The Apostle Paul, who came after Jesus, would explain that God is for you. He's in your corner. And because of that, when you look at like the world as a whole and God's role in it, there's this idea that he is working even bad things together for your good. Now the question then is, do you believe that? Now don't mishear what I'm saying. I'm not saying, are you supposed to believe that? I'm not saying, have you been taught to say you believe that? I'm saying, is that a belief that is functioning deep beneath the surface? That there really is a God who is deeply invested in your good. Deeply invested in your good. Because I don't know, if you're like me, honestly, for a long time, in my story, God was the thief. Like, God felt like the one, and I wouldn't say this because I was afraid to, but God felt like the one who was limiting me, who was holding me back. Well, if I start doing the whole God thing, there's a ton of things I'm gonna miss out on. Right? Not genuinely interested in my good, like I'm genuinely interested in my good, and I'm not quite sure if God is. And there's that belief that was living there, that was informing so much of how I lived and what I did. And the leaves on my like God tree were not leaves of gratitude. They were leaves of obligation and shoulds and supposed tos. But I learned to say, yes, I'm grateful to God. But at the core, there was this belief that I really don't think God's all that great. And so the question really is, do you believe that? Do you believe that? That's the first step toward gratitude. You don't become more grateful by simply saying, all right, I really am grateful. Like this time I really am. Let me just say it over and over, like I really am grateful. If you want to be more grateful, it comes with recognizing what the belief is beneath the surface. Like last week, the goal of last week, if you were here, we did communion, we talked about all that and what that means. The outcome of that, and I saw it, the outcome of that for a lot of people was gratitude. We didn't mention gratitude once, but a belief beneath the surface was addressed, and the awareness of it made it malleable, and it led to genuine feelings of gratitude. If you believe there's a God in your corner, that has the ability to bring leaves of gratitude to every area of life to some extent or another. I'm not saying you put on a plastic smile and pretend that bad things are good. I'm saying it has the ability to bring hope and meaning and purpose in areas that there would not be if you felt like this is the way things always end up for me. Like God's just out to get me. God is not in the business of my well-being. There's this one story in the Gospels, and it's one of my favorites, and I think it's something we can learn so much from. There's a guy who goes to Jesus, and he asks him for something pretty big, and Jesus goes, in essence, he says, do you believe I can do this? And the guy goes, I do. Like, I believe. And then he says, but help my unbelief. And that, for me, that's the place to start. And if there's part of you that wants to get to that place of gratitude, it comes with being real, being aware of what the real belief is. And there's no shame in recognizing what the belief is there. Like the guy was commended for his authenticity because he was willing to say, I'm not there yet. I need you to help me get there. And Jesus does. And so if you want to live a life that is filled with more gratitude, especially as it pertains to God and all the areas of life that affects, we don't work on the leaves just by saying, now I'm grateful, or I'm grateful. We deal with the hard things in the heart and ask God to help. Help in the areas we believe, and where there is unbelief. And when we become aware of that, that's when we're given the ability to change. I'm going to ask the band to come back up here. We're going to wrap up. But here's an example of how this worked for me in my life. When I was in college, I did this internship at a church. It was a new church. And I was working with this pastor who was like one of my role models. He was doing what I wanted to do one day. And he had a son and a friend. And he asked me to take the son and the friend out one day. And it was in Florida. It was hot. It was the middle of summer. I was irritable. My patience just weren't really there. These kids were getting on my nerves. They were touching all the buttons on my car radio. And I was just I just had it with these kids. And at some point, somebody said something or did something that caused me to do something on the road. I honestly don't remember the details. But I got startled. And I just turned to them and just vomited up some words that didn't sound very pastoral internship to the pastor's son. And then I took a breath. We kept driving, pulled over. Or got where we needed to. And I turned around, I apologized. I was like, look, I'm sorry, I should have said this, and tried to make it right with them. And they were nice about it, they were great. And they stopped doing what I told them to stop doing. It's just nice. But then I went back to the guy's house, the pastor's house. I'm like, well, time to face the music, And I'm nervous, because this guy, I look up to him, I care a lot, and now I'm like, he's not gonna trust me anymore. What is this gonna look like? And so I sit down with him in his office, and I'm like, I gotta tell you what I did with your son and his friend that you trusted me with. And I begin to explain the whole story. And he looks at me, real serious look on his face, and he's like, did you own it? I was like, yeah. He's like, did you make it right? You're trying to make it right with these boys. And I was like, yeah. He's like, all right, well, I forgive you. And what are you going to do with that? I was like, what do you mean? What am I going to do with that? He's like, well, how are you going to act after you leave here? I was like, I don't know. Like, where are you going with this? And he's like, my guess, knowing what he knew of me at that point, is you're probably going to leave here and beat yourself up for a little while. Like, you're probably going to wonder if I trust you. You're probably going to wonder, you just for a few days, feel like garbage until you kind of get over it and move on. I was like, yeah, that's probably about right. And he goes, here's what I want you to do. I want you to get up, leave my office, and act as if this never happened. Like it is not an issue in our relationship or in how I see you. Because that's what forgiveness is. And for whatever reason, the way that he put that addressed a belief beneath the surface for me in the way that I understood God and the way that God sees me. Like whenever I tried to be grateful for God's forgiveness, it never registered emotionally. And maybe I would say I was grateful for it and sing about being grateful for it. But if I'm being honest, there weren't real felt feelings of gratitude toward God and forgiveness until what he allowed me to experience, the weightlessness, the burden lifted, actually addressed a belief beneath the surface that I became aware of. Like maybe I never actually understood what it meant to know that God forgives me. And the response there were leaves of gratitude. And it wasn't because he told me to. It wasn't even because I tried to. It was because I became aware of a belief beneath the surface. It was changed. And so this week, in areas of your life, especially your faith, where you're wrestling with feelings of gratitude, this doesn't apply to all situations. Sometimes it's other things like directing your attention to the good in your life. But with some of them, it really comes back to what you actually believe. And so where you're struggling to feel grateful, my challenge for you this week is to take some time to be still, take a breath, be quiet, and think like, okay, what do I actually believe here that's maybe undermining feelings of gratitude instead of amplifying?